I was standing exactly 10 feet from the heavy oak door of my in-laws' kitchen, my arms dead-weighted with 3 shopping bags and a purse that held a nuclear bomb wrapped in silver paper. Inside that purse, tucked into a side pocket next to a half-empty pack of spearmint gum, were 3 plastic sticks, all positive, all screaming the news that my husband, Marshall, and I had been praying for, crying over, and spending thousands of dollars to achieve for 2 years. I was pregnant. Finally, miraculously pregnant. It was 6:47 p.m. on Christmas Eve. I was 43 minutes early. That was the mistake. Not the pregnancy, not the trip to Boston. The mistake was catching an earlier flight, landing at 6:15 instead of 7 Island, and deciding to surprise Marshall. I wanted that cinematic moment. I wanted to walk in while he was putting the star on the tree, tap him on the shoulder, and watch his face melt from confusion to the kind of joy that makes your knees buckle. Instead, I was standing in the hallway on the hardwood floor that always creaked near the staircase, paralyzed by a voice I recognized but didn't understand. "She's lying to me, Dad. I'm telling you, the math doesn't work." That was Marshall. But it wasn't the Marshall I spoke to every night on the phone. This voice was cold, detached, surgical. It was the voice he used when he was arguing with a subcontractor who'd poured the wrong grade of concrete. The hallway smelled like pine needles and Constance's famous cinnamon rolls, a scent that usually made me feel safe, wrapped in the warmth of a family that had adopted me as their own. Now, it smelled cloying, suffocating. Bing Crosby was crooning White Christmas from the vintage record player in the living room, the crackle of the vinyl usually charming, now just a static hiss underneath the destruction of my marriage. I shifted the bags. The plastic handles dug into my palms. My heart did this weird flutter-thud thing against my ribs. "Walk in," my brain commanded. "Walk in and kiss him and tell him he's being an idiot." But I couldn't move. "Marshall, please." Constance's voice was softer, trembling. "You're exhausted. You've been working yourself into a state since Thanksgiving. Audrey loves you. She's just busy with the Harbor View restoration. That project is massive." "It's not the project, Mom," Marshall snapped, and the violence in his tone made me flinch physically. I saw his shadow stretch across the sliver of light spilling from the kitchen doorway. He was pacing. "It's him. It's Garrison, her boss, the mentor, the guy she talks about constantly. Garrison approved the blueprints. Garrison thinks the facade needs work. Garrison took the team out for drinks." "You think I'm stupid?" I stopped breathing. Garrison? My 53-year-old boss? The man who wore sweater vests and showed me pictures of his golden retrievers every Monday morning? The man who is currently at home with his wife, Gwendolyn, probably arguing about eggnog recipes? "She's sleeping with him," Marshall said. The sentence hung in the air, heavier than the humidity in Boston. "I know she is, and I'm not going to sit here and play the fool while she comes home for Christmas and pretends everything is fine." The bag in my left hand slipped. It was the one containing the vintage Red Sox cap I'd hunted down for Marshall, an ironic gift because he was a die-hard Yankees fan. It hit the floor, a soft thump. Inside the kitchen, nobody heard it. They were too busy listening to my husband explain why I was a whore. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. I should have barged in. That's what they do in movies, right? The heroine kicks the door open, throws the evidence on the table, and demands an apology. But real life isn't a movie. In real life, when the person you trust most in the world rewrites your entire history together into a sordid crime drama, you don't fight. You freeze. I leaned back against the floral wallpaper of the hallway, trying to make myself invisible, trying to absorb the venom seeping out of the kitchen. "You're making a serious accusation, son," Richard said. His voice was low, the rumble of a disappointed patriarch. "Do you have proof? Actual proof? Not just feelings." "I have the credit card statements, Dad," Marshall said, his voice rising in pitch, manic. Look at this. I printed them out. October 15th, October 29th, November 12th. 3 charges to Boston Women's Health Associates. I looked it up. It's an OB/GYN clinic. Why is my wife seeing an obstetrician in Boston if she's not pregnant? And if she is pregnant, why hasn't she told me? We haven't slept together since August. Do the math. My hand flew to my stomach instinctively. The charges, of course. I had used our joint card. I hadn't even thought to hide them, because why would I hide prenatal care for our baby? I assumed if he saw them, he'd call me and ask, "Honey, are you okay?" Or maybe he'd figure out the surprise early. I never, in a million years, thought he would weaponize a copay. Maybe it's a cyst, Constance tried, bless her heart. Maybe she's sick and didn't want to worry you until she knew for sure. It's not a cyst, Mom, it's prenatal care. The amounts match the standard copays for ultrasounds. She's pregnant, and since I haven't touched her in 4 months because we've been too busy or too tired, that baby isn't mine. He said it with such conviction, such absolute terrifying certainty. I filed the papers this morning, Marshall added. The silence that followed was so loud it made my ears ring. You did what? Richard asked. I called our lawyer. I had the divorce papers drawn up. They're being served tonight. Here. At 7:30. Marshall James. Constance gasped, a sound of pure horror. Tonight? On Christmas Eve? You're going to serve your wife divorce papers in front of the entire family? She doesn't get to blindside me, Marshall said, and I could hear the tears in his voice now, the twisted mix of rage and heartbreak. She thinks she's going to walk in here, act like the perfect wife, maybe even try to pass this baby off as mine eventually. I want her to know that I know. I want everyone to know. I'm not going to be the pathetic husband raising another man's bastard. I slid down the wall until I was crouching on the floor. My knees were shaking so hard I couldn't lock them. Bastard. He called our daughter. I felt in my bones it was a girl, a bastard. You are making a mistake, Richard said, his voice hard. You are acting on emotion, not fact. If you do this, Marshall, you can't undo it. You humiliate her tonight, and this marriage is over regardless of the truth. It's already over, Marshall spat. She ended it when she opened her legs for her boss. That was it. That was the sentence that broke the paralysis. It wasn't anger that flooded me. Not yet. It was survival instinct. If I walked in there now, I would be the defendant in a kangaroo court. He had the papers. He had the narrative. He had the evidence. I had a stick with pee on it and a husband who had already decided I was a monster. I couldn't face him. Not like this. Not while I was shaking and nauseous and heartbroken. I needed to leave. My flight was supposed to land at 7:15. It was currently 6:52. I grabbed the handle of the dropped bag, wincing as the paper crinkled. I held my breath, waiting for the voices in the kitchen to pause, for footsteps to come rushing toward the hallway. But Marshall was on a roll, ranting about how I'd been distant on the phone, how I'd stopped texting back immediately. I backed up. 1 step, 2 steps. My heel caught the edge of the entry rug and I stumbled, catching myself on the doorframe. Silence from the kitchen. Did you hear that? Marshall asked. Probably just the wind, honey, Constance said soothingly, or the heating settling. I turned and opened the front door. I didn't close it gently. I didn't care anymore about being quiet. I stepped out into the biting December wind, the cold air slapping my wet cheeks. I hadn't realized I was crying until the wind hit the tears. I sprinted to the rental car, a silver Toyota Camry that smelled like stale cigarettes. I threw the bags into the passenger seat, the pregnancy tests sliding out of my purse and scattering across the upholstery like spent shell casings. I locked the doors. My hands were trembling so violently I could barely type on my phone. Text message to Marshall. Hey, bad news. Flight got delayed on the tarmac, storm patterns or something. Pilot says we're stuck for another hour at least. Start the party without me. Love you. I hit send. Then I watched the house. Through the bay window of the living room, I could see the hallway leading to the kitchen. A moment later, Marshall walked out, phone in hand. He looked at the screen. He looked up at the ceiling, shaking his head. I could almost hear him scoff. Liar. My phone buzzed. Marshall. That sucks. Drive safe when you get in. We're here. Drive safe. He was planning to ambush me with a process server and destroy my life in front of his parents, his brother Julian and his sister-in-law, and he was texting me to drive safe. The level of psychopathy required to maintain that facade, it made me want to vomit. I put the car in reverse. I didn't turn on the headlights until I was down the block, rounding the corner past the neighbor's inflatable Santa display. I drove without a destination. I just drove away from the house that was supposed to be my home, away from the husband who hated me, away from the Christmas Eve I had spent 3 weeks dreaming about. I drove until the suburbs turned into strip malls, and the strip malls turned into the highway on-ramp. I merged onto I-95 South, headed nowhere. I couldn't go to a nice hotel. The nice hotels were downtown, and if Marshall checked our credit card statements, which he clearly was doing obsessively, he would see a charge for the Hilton or the Marriott and know I was lying about the flight. I needed somewhere anonymous, somewhere cash only, or at least somewhere that didn't look like a romantic getaway for my imaginary affair. I found the Bluebird Inn off exit 14. It was one of those places where the no vacancy sign flickered ominously, and the doors opened directly to the parking lot. The lobby smelled like industrial lemon cleaner, masking something distinctively fungal. The clerk was a teenager with acne scars and zero interest in my existence. "One night," he mumbled, not looking up from his phone. "Maybe a few, depending," I said. My voice sounded jagged, like I'd swallowed glass. "Cash?" $50 deposit for incidentals. I handed over a crisp $100 bill I'd kept in my emergency stash. Put it under Audrey Miller. My maiden name. The name I hadn't used in 5 years. Saying it felt like trying on a coat that used to fit but was now tight in the shoulders. Room 112 was around the back, facing a dumpster. I parked the Camry, grabbed my purse and the evidence bag, the pregnancy tests, and let myself in. The room was beige carpet, beige walls, beige bedspread with a suspicious stain near the foot. The heat was cranked up way too high, blasting dry, dusty air that instantly dried out my contacts. I sat on the edge of the mattress. It crunched. Then, the nausea hit. I barely made it to the bathroom. I fell to my knees on the cold tile and dry heaved into the toilet bowl, my body convulsing with the physical manifestation of my life imploding. There was nothing to bring up. I hadn't eaten since a pretzel at Logan Airport 6 hours ago, so I just gagged until my ribs ached and my eyes watered. Pregnant, I thought, wiping my mouth with a scratchy piece of toilet paper. I am pregnant, and I am alone in a roach motel on Christmas Eve. I stood up, flushed the toilet, and splashed water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. My mascara had run in jagged streaks down my cheeks. My skin was pale, almost gray. I looked like a ghost. I walked back into the main room and dumped the contents of my purse onto the scratched laminate desk. Phone, wallet, keys, 3 pregnancy tests wrapped in festive snowflakes. I unwrapped one. Pregnant. I took a picture of it. Then I opened my laptop. If Marshall wanted a war, he was going to get one. But I wasn't going to fight with screaming matches and tears. I was an architect. I built things. I solved structural problems. And right now, my marriage had a foundational crack that was threatening to bring the whole house down. I needed data. I stared at my phone for 20 minutes before I made the call. There was only one person who might tell me the truth. One person who lived in Marshall's orbit but hadn't completely drunk the Kool-Aid yet. Donovan, Marshall's best friend since 2nd grade, the guy who toasted us at our wedding and made a crude joke about our honeymoon that made my mother blush. I dialed. It rang 4 times. "Audrey?" Donovan's voice was tight, guarded. "Where are you? Marshall said your flight got delayed." I'm at a motel off the highway, I said, cutting straight to the bone. I was at the house, Donovan. I arrived early. I heard everything. Silence on the other end. Long, heavy silence. I could hear the background noise of a TV, probably a football game. Oh, shit, Donovan whispered. Audrey, Look, I told him he was crazy. Did you? I asked, my voice trembling, because he sounded pretty convinced. He thinks I'm sleeping with Garrison. He thinks the baby isn't his. You're pregnant? Donovan asked. Actually pregnant? Yes, that's why I was seeing the doctor. That's the affair he's talking about. Me getting prenatal care so I could surprise him tonight. I was shouting now, the hysteria bubbling up. Jesus, Donovan exhaled. Jesus, Audrey. He's gone off the deep end. You have to understand, he's not thinking straight. Explain it to me, Donovan, because from where I'm sitting, my husband just hired a process server to humiliate me. Why? Why is he doing this? Donovan hesitated. It's Julian. Julian? His brother? What does Julian have to do with this? Julian and Sarah announced they're expecting at Thanksgiving. You weren't there. You were in Boston. They're having a boy, and Richard made a comment. What kind of comment? You know Richard, Donovan sighed. He had a few scotches. He slapped Marshall on the back and said, well, at least one of my boys can get the job done. Maybe you're shooting blanks, son. My stomach dropped. Oh my God. Yeah, Marshall laughed it off, but I saw his face. It wrecked him, Audrey. He's been obsessing over it. He started digging into why you guys haven't conceived in 2 years. He went to a doctor himself, got tested. His count was a little low. Not 0, just low. But in his head, he's sterile. So when he saw your charges, when he saw you were pregnant, his brain just connected the dots. If he's sterile and you're pregnant, you must be cheating. He could have asked me, I whispered. He could have just asked. He's ashamed, Donovan said. And then, there's the other thing, the rumor. I sat up straighter. What rumor? Marshall said he has a source. Someone at your firm. Someone who told him you and Garrison were getting cozy on the late nights. Who? I demanded. Who the hell would say that? He wouldn't give me a name, just said he had it on good authority, a friend inside the Harborview project. My mind raced. A source? A mole? Donovan, I said, gripping the phone, I need you to do something for me. I need you to find out who that source is, because that person is feeding my husband poison. Audrey, I can't get in the middle of... You are already in the middle, I snapped. You're the only friend he has who isn't an echo chamber. Please, if you care about him, if you care about us, find out who he's talking to. A pause. Then a resigned sigh. I'll try. I'm going over there tomorrow for Christmas dinner. I'll see what I can get out of him. Thank you, I said. Audrey? Yeah? I believe you, for the record. I hung up and stared at the beige wall. A source. Someone was lying about me, and I had a sinking suspicion I knew exactly who it was. The source. The word bounced around my skull like a pinball. Marshall wasn't creative enough to invent a witness out of thin air. Someone had planted a seed. I opened my laptop and logged into the company's Slack. It was 9:30 p.m. on Christmas Eve, and the green active dot next to my name felt like a spotlight. Who hated me? In a firm of 40 people, plenty of people found me annoying. I was the youngest project lead in the company's history. I was demanding. I checked margins with a micrometer. But who hated me enough to destroy my marriage? Brenda Kowalski, the junior associate who had applied for the Harborview lead and got rejected. Brenda, who rolled her eyes every time I asked for a revision. Brenda, who had made a snide comment 3 weeks ago about how Garrison certainly plays favorites with the pretty ones. My fingers flew across the keyboard searching my email archives for Brenda. I found it. An email thread from November 14th, from Brenda Kowalski. To Garrison Ford, CC, HR subject, overtime concerns. I'm just concerned that the project allocation seems skewed. Audrey and Garrison seem to be handling all the late-night site visits exclusively. It creates a bottleneck for the rest of us." There it was, the insinuation. Exclusively. I logged into my LinkedIn. I searched for connections. Did Brenda know Marshall? I clicked on her profile. 500 plus connections. I scrolled through them, my eyes scanning for familiar names. And then my blood ran cold. Mutual connection. Julian Miller, Marshall's brother. Brenda went to college with Julian. They were Facebook friends. They were connected. "You bitch!" I hissed at the screen. It made perfect sense. Brenda feeds lies to Julian. Julian, the golden child, casually mentions to Marshall, "Hey, my friend Brenda says Audrey and her boss are pretty close." Marshall, already spiraling from his father's shooting blanks comment, takes that spark and pours gasoline on it. I spent the next 6 hours, until 3 a.m., building a dossier on Brenda Kowalski. I downloaded every passive-aggressive email. I cross-referenced her site visit complaints with my actual logs. I was going to crush her. I was going to sue her for defamation. I was going to walk into Marshall's house with a flow chart linking Brenda's jealousy to his paranoia. I felt manic. I felt productive. I was completely wrong. Christmas morning broke gray and slushy. I woke up in the motel bed with my laptop burning a rectangle of heat into my thigh. I had fallen asleep reviewing Brenda's performance reviews, which I had access to as her superior. I needed to confirm the link. I needed to know exactly what she said to Julian. I couldn't call Julian. He was at the war room, my in-laws' house, so I did something unethical. I called Sarah, Julian's wife, the sister-in-law I actually liked, the one who was pregnant with the miracle grandson. She answered on the second ring, her voice hushed. "Audrey? Oh my God, where are you? Marshall told us you're stuck in Boston. We're all so worried." "I'm not in Boston, Sarah. I'm 10 minutes away." "What?" "Listen, I can't explain right now, but I need to ask you something. It's important. Does Julian know a woman named Brenda Kowalski?" "Brenda?" Sarah sounded confused. "From UMass. Yeah, they dated for like a semester freshman year. Why?" "Did she tell him anything about me? About me and Garrison?" "What? No. Audrey, Julian hasn't spoken to Brenda in 10 years. She moved to... Wait, she works with you?" "Yes, and I think she's the source Marshall is talking about." "Audrey," Sarah said gently. "Marshall doesn't have a source." I froze. "What do you mean?" Donovan said... Donovan doesn't know the half of it. Marshall was ranting last night after everyone left. He admitted he was checking your Find My Friends location. He saw you were at the Harbor View Hotel late at night. He assumed you were with Garrison because Garrison posted a photo of the hotel lobby on Instagram at the same time. My stomach bottomed out. He tracked my location. Yes, and he saw a photo on Instagram. That's the source, Audrey. It's not a person. It's his own paranoid scrolling. He saw you were both in the same building and invented the rest. I closed my eyes. The Brenda dossier, the 6 hours of digging, the conspiracy theory. It was all useless. There was no villainous coworker. There was no saboteur. There was just my husband sitting alone in the dark, refreshing an Instagram feed and tracking a GPS dot, building a nightmare out of pixels. I had wasted 24 hours hunting a ghost. "Audrey," Sarah whispered, "are you okay?" "No," I said. "I'm really not." I hung up. I looked at the Brenda folder on my desktop. I dragged it to the trash. I didn't have a scapegoat anymore. I had to face the reality that my husband had broken his own mind. I couldn't stay in the motel. The walls were closing in. I needed allies, real ones. I texted Garrison, me, "Emergency, I need to see you, please. It's about Marshall and you." He replied instantly, "Diner on 4th, 30 mins." When I walked into the Rusty Spoon, I felt like I was wearing a scarlet letter. I was wearing leggings and an oversized sweater I'd bought at a CVS because I hadn't packed casual clothes. Garrison was sitting in a booth in the back. But he wasn't alone. Gwendolyn was with him. She was wearing a pristine cashmere coat and pearl earrings, looking like she was ready for high tea, not a diner confrontation. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and currently scanning me like a barcode reader. I slid into the booth opposite them. I couldn't look Gwendolyn in the eye. "I'm so sorry," I started, my voice cracking. "I am so sorry to drag you into this." "Stop," Gwendolyn said. Her voice wasn't angry. It was steel. "Garrison told me. He told me what your husband said." I looked at Garrison. He looked tired. He looked like a dad who just found out his kid crashed the car. "He thinks we're together," I whispered. "He's telling his family that the baby I'm carrying is yours, Garrison." Garrison took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Audrey, I'm flattered, truly, but I'm old enough to be your father and I'm terrified of my wife. Marshall has lost his mind." "He's filed for divorce," I said. "He wants to subpoena you. He wants to drag your name through the mud." Gwendolyn slammed her hand down on the table. The silverware rattled. "Over my dead body," she hissed. "That insecure little boy is not going to ruin my husband's reputation because he can't handle a successful wife." I blinked. I expected her to be suspicious. I expected her to ask if it was true. You believe me?" Gwendolyn reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Audrey, honey, Garrison calls me every night at 7 p.m. He FaceTimes me to show me his dinner. I track his credit card because I'm the one who pays the bills. Unless you were having sex with him via telepathy while he was eating room service sliders and talking to me about the crown, there is no affair." Tears welled up in my eyes. "I have to prove it to him. I have to prove I wasn't with you." "We will write affidavits," Gwendolyn declared. "I will pull the phone records. I will pull the credit card statements showing Garrison's location. And I will personally march down to that courthouse and tell the judge that if your husband is that stupid, he doesn't deserve a license to drive, let alone a marriage." "We'll help, Audrey," Garrison said gently. "Whatever you need. Documentation, schedules, witness testimony from the team." "I need the hotel footage," I said, my architect brain kicking back in. "The harbor view, the hallway cameras. If I can get the footage showing I went into my room alone every night and you went into yours, that's the smoking gun. That's undeniable." Garrison nodded. "I know the manager, Frank. I'll call him right now." He pulled out his phone. I felt a surge of hope. Security footage. Hard evidence. The one thing Marshall couldn't argue with. Garrison put the phone on speaker so we could both hear. "Frank, Merry Christmas," Garrison said, forcing a jovial tone. "Look, I have a weird request. Emergency situation. We need to pull security footage from the hallway cameras. 4th floor. The last 6 weeks." There was a pause on the line. Static. "Garrison?" Frank's voice sounded apologetic. "You know I'd do anything for you, but the system updated last month." My chest tightened. "What does that mean?" I whispered. "We switched to the cloud server to save space," Frank explained. "It's on a 14-day loop. Unless an incident is flagged, like a robbery or a fire, the footage is overwritten automatically after 2 weeks. I felt the blood drain from my face. 14 days? Garrison asked. You don't have backups? No, it's gone, Garrison. If you're looking for something from October or November, it doesn't exist anymore. It's just digital noise. Garrison hung up. The booth was silent. The waitress came by to refill coffee, saw our faces, and wisely retreated. My smoking gun was gone. The irrefutable proof, the video of me sleeping alone, walking alone, being boring and faithful, was deleted. Okay, Gwendolyn said, breaking the silence. So we don't have video. We find something else. What else is there? I asked, my voice rising. He thinks I'm a mastermind. He thinks I planned this. Without that video, it's his word against mine. It is not, Gwendolyn corrected. It is his delusion against data. You're an architect, Audrey. You live in a world of measurements. Build the case, brick by brick. She was right. But the easy way out was gone. Now I had to do it the hard way. I went back to the motel. I didn't celebrate Christmas. I didn't eat the turkey sandwich I bought from a gas station. I turned room 112 into a crime lab. I stripped the bed sheets off to use the white mattress cover as a whiteboard, taping up receipts and timelines with Scotch tape. If I didn't have video, I had digital footprints. I logged into my Google account. Timeline, location history. It was a mess. Raw data points, longitude and latitude. November 12th, 8:14 p.m. Location, Harborview Hotel. Duration, 12 hours. Okay, that proved I was at the hotel, but Marshall knew that. He thought Garrison was at the room with me. I logged into Uber. November 12th, 7:45 p.m. Ride from Site B to Harborview Hotel. Passenger, Audrey Miller. I logged into the hotel's Wi-Fi portal. I still had the admin password from the project setup. I pulled the device logs. Device, Audrey's MacBook Pro. Connection time, 8:20 p.m., 11:45 p.m. Data usage, 4.2 GB. I cross-referenced it with my Netflix history. November 12th, 8:30 p.m. Watched The Great British Bake Off. Episodes 4, 5, 6. I was building a mosaic of a boring life. Who cheats while binge-watching people bake cakes for 3 hours? But it wasn't enough. It was circumstantial. Marshall would say, Garrison was watching it with you. I needed something biometric, something that proved Garrison wasn't there. I called Garrison back. Does your Apple Watch track your heart rate? Yes, he answered, confused. Does it track your sleep? Yes. Send me the data, I commanded. Export the health XML files, right now. If Garrison was sleeping in his room, or better yet, FaceTiming Gwendolyn, his heart rate would show it. If he was having a passionate affair with me, his heart rate would vary. It was invasive. It was humiliating. I was analyzing my boss's resting heart rate to prove I wasn't sleeping with him. I sat there until 4 a.m., merging spreadsheets. Column A, Audrey's Netflix logs. Column B, Garrison's heart rate, sleeping. Column C, Gwendolyn's phone records, FaceTime calls. The data didn't lie. The timelines were 2 parallel lines that never intersected. I printed it all out on the portable printer I traveled with. The printer whirred and clicked, spitting out page after page of exoneration. I looked at the stack of papers. It looked like a manifesto. It lacked one thing: the biology. I needed to prove when the baby was made. Marshall said the math didn't work. He said he hadn't touched me since August. I looked at my calendar. August 24th. The weekend before the project started. The weekend we went to the Cape. The weekend we got drunk on wine and... I remembered it perfectly. I needed a doctor to put a stamp on that date. I needed medical math. I picked up my phone and dialed Dr. Sterling's emergency line. It was 4:15 a.m. on December 26th. Hello? A groggy voice answered. Dr. Sterling, it's Audrey Miller. I'm having an emergency. Not a medical one, a legal one. I need you to date my pregnancy, to the day. Audrey? She sounded confused. We did that at your 12-week scan. I need it in writing, notarized, and I need you to explain to a jury or my husband how sperm survival rates work. Okay, she said slowly. Come in at 8:01 a.m. I hung up. I looked at my wall of evidence. I was ready to go to war. Dr. Sterling's office was an oasis of chrome and white leather that usually smelled like lavender and expensive sanitizer. Today, to me, it smelled like a courtroom. I was sitting on the examination table, the paper crinkling loudly every time I shifted my weight, which was constantly because I was vibrating with anxiety. It was 8:15 a.m. Dr. Sterling breezed in, holding a clipboard, looking like she'd already run a marathon and delivered 3 babies before breakfast. She stopped when she saw my face. "You look like hell, Audrey," she said, closing the door with a soft click. "And when I say hell, I mean you look like a woman who hasn't slept in 48 hours and is running on cortisol in spite." "Accurate," I said, my voice rasping. "Did you bring the file?" She sat down on the rolling stool and sighed, spinning the clipboard around to face me. "I did. But Audrey, before we get into the math, I need to ask, is this safe? Do I need to call social services? If your husband is making accusations like this..." "He's not violent," I cut in. "He's broken. He's constructed a reality where he's the victim, and I need to dismantle it with science. I need you to be the expert witness who tells him he's an idiot." Dr. Sterling tapped a manicured nail on the chart. "Okay, let's look at the biology. Your last menstrual period was August 6th. You have a standard 28-day cycle. We confirmed this with your tracking app history during your first visit." "Right," I said, pulling out my notebook to write this down. "So ovulation was August 20th, give or take 24 hours, she said. "Now, based on the crown rump length from your 12-week ultrasound, which is the gold standard for dating. By the way, it's accurate to within 3 days. Your conception date is pinpointed to August 22nd. I stared at the date. August 22nd. "Marshall and I were at the Cape that weekend," I whispered. "We drove down Friday night. That was the 21st. We stayed until Sunday the 23rd. "Exactly," Dr. Sterling said. "Sperm can survive inside the reproductive tract for up to 5 days, Audrey. Even if you had sex on the 21st, conception could happen on the 22nd or 23rd. But here is the biological impossibility. If you had slept with your boss in Boston in October, you wouldn't be measuring at 14 weeks now. You'd be measuring at 8 weeks. A fetus doesn't just grow faster because of an affair." She pulled out a piece of official letterhead and started writing. "I am drafting a formal medical statement," she narrated as she wrote, "stating that based on fetal biometry, conception occurred strictly between August 20th and August 25th. Any sexual activity occurring in October or November is medically irrelevant to this pregnancy." She stamped it with her official seal. It made a heavy, authoritative thud. "Here," she handed it to me. "This is irrefutable. If he argues with this, he's arguing with biology." I took the paper. It felt heavy. This was it. The shield. "One more thing," Dr. Sterling said, her voice softening. "Stress is bad for the baby, Audrey. High cortisol levels. It's not good. Whatever you're planning to do with this paper, do it fast. You need to be done with this fight." "I know," I said, sliding the paper into my folder next to the heart rate graphs. "I'm ending it today." I was back in the rental car, idling in the parking lot of the medical center when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I normally ignore these, assuming it's a "your car warranty is expiring" scam, but something made me answer. "Hello? Audrey, it's Constance." My mother-in-law. Her voice sounded thin, reedy, like she was whispering from inside a closet. "Constance," I said, stiffening, "if you're calling to tell me to sign the papers..." "No," she hissed. "Listen to me. I don't have much time. Richard is in the garden and Marshall went to work." "He went to work?" I asked, incredulous. "He nuked his marriage on Christmas Eve and just went to the office. He says he needs the distraction. He's not functioning, Audrey. He's just staring at walls. But that's not why I'm calling." She paused, and I heard the sound of a door closing in the background. "I saw the way you looked at him, Audrey, before you left. You didn't look guilty. You looked shocked." "I am shocked, Constance. I'm pregnant with his child, and he's treating me like a criminal." "I know," she whispered. "I know. Marshall he's always been fragile. Since he was a boy. Always worried he wasn't enough. When Julian got the scholarship, Marshall stopped eating for a week. When Julian got promoted, Marshall got migraines. He compares himself until he disappears. That doesn't give him the right to destroy me. No, it doesn't. But I'm his mother, and I know when my son is sick. And I think he's sick, Audrey. I think this isn't about you. It's about the voices in his head telling him he's a failure. I gripped the steering wheel. Why are you telling me this? Because you need your things, she said. You left your bags, your laptop charger, your journals. Marshall locked the house. He changed the code on the front door keypad yesterday morning. He didn't tell us, but I saw him doing it. Of course he did. He locked me out of my own home. But he forgot about the mudroom door, Constance continued. The one behind the trellis. The latch is sticky. It doesn't always engage. Are you telling me to break in? I'm telling you that I'm going to go over there in 20 minutes to water the plants while he's at work, Constance said, her voice trembling slightly. And if I happen to leave the mudroom door unlatched, well, I'm getting old. I'm forgetful. I sat there stunned. Constance, the woman who followed rules so strictly she ironed her pillowcases, was aiding and abetting a break-in. Thank you, I whispered. Just be fast, she said. And Audrey, if you find anything that explains why he's doing this, please, don't just destroy him. Try to understand him. She hung up. I looked at the clock. 9:45 a.m. I had a window. The house, our house, looked different when I pulled into the driveway. It looked hostile. The Christmas wreath on the door, which I had made by hand using pine branches from the backyard, looked brown and dead. I parked the rental car 3 houses down in front of the neighbor's place, just in case Marshall had the neighbors watching. I pulled my hood up and walked quickly up the driveway, ducking behind the overgrown rhododendrons. I reached the mudroom door. It looked closed. I pushed. It stuck for a second, then groaned open. Constance, you beautiful, rebellious woman. I stepped inside. The air in the house was stale. It smelled like old coffee and something sour, like garbage that hadn't been taken out in days. Hello? I whispered, even though I knew it was empty. Silence. I walked through the kitchen. There were dishes piled in the sink, takeout boxes. Marshall never left dishes. He was a neat freak. This was the first sign of the decay. I went upstairs. The hallway photos, our wedding, our trip to Italy, were still on the walls. He hadn't smashed them. That was a surprise. I pushed open the door to our bedroom. It was a disaster zone. Clothes were everywhere. The bed was unmade, sheets tangled like a wrestling match had happened, and on the nightstand, right next to a half-empty bottle of whiskey, Marshall didn't drink whiskey, was a stack of notebooks. I knew these notebooks. Marshall used them for work, project sketches, dimensions. But one was open, and it wasn't sketches. It was a wall of text. Tiny, frantic handwriting scrawled so hard the pen had torn through the paper in places. I picked it up. My hands were shaking. December 12th. She didn't answer at 8. She answered at 8:12. Where was she for 12 minutes? Elevator? Garrison's room? I checked the flight schedules. Garrison could have flown up on the shuttle. Need to check his mileage points. December 14th. Dad asked about grandkids again. Looked at me with that pity. He knows. Everyone knows I'm the end of the line. Julian is the future. I'm just the placeholder. December 20th. Saw the charge. $200. Ultrasound cost. Why hasn't she told me? Because she's deciding how to leave. She's going to wait until after Christmas. She wants to pity me through the holidays. I can't let her pity me. I have to strike first. I flipped back a few pages. November 28th. I feel like I'm drowning. I can't breathe in this house. It's too big. It's too empty. I am a failure of a man. I can't give her a child. I can't give my parents a legacy. If she leaves, I die. If she stays out of pity, I die faster. I sat down on the edge of the unmade bed, clutching the notebook. This wasn't a villain's manifesto. This was a suicide note in slow motion. He wasn't attacking me because he hated me. He was attacking me because he hated himself so violently, so completely, that he couldn't conceive of a world where I didn't hate him too. He had projected his own self-loathing onto me, turned me into a monster so that my inevitable abandonment would make sense. I took out my phone. I didn't steal the notebook. That felt like a violation too far. But I took photos. Page after page of his spiraling mind. This was the final piece of evidence. Not of my innocence. I had that already. This was evidence of his guilt, or rather, his sickness. I grabbed my own journals from the drawer, shoved my laptop charger into my bag, and ran. I felt like I was escaping a haunted house. Jocelyn's office was on the 40th floor of a Glass Needle downtown. It cost $500 an hour just to breathe the air in here. I had emptied my personal savings account to pay her retainer. I sat in a leather chair that was worth more than my car, spreading my evidence across her mahogany desk. Jocelyn was 60, terrifying, and wore a suit that looked like it was cut from sharkskin. She looked at Dr. Sterling's note. She looked at the heart rate data. She looked at Gwendolyn's affidavit. "This is impressive," Jocelyn said, peering over her glasses. "Audrey, usually when clients come to me with proof, it's a screenshot of a text message that means nothing. This is a forensic dismantling of his case. I can get this divorce dismissed in 10 minutes. I can get you a settlement for defamation. I can get you full custody of the child before it's even born." She leaned back, steepling her fingers. "We can file a countersuit for emotional distress. We can go for the house. We can go for his retirement. Given the public nature of the threat, the process server on Christmas Eve, a judge will hate him. You will win everything." I looked at the city skyline outside the window. The gray winter clouds were breaking, letting a little weak sunlight through. "I don't want his money," I said quietly. "I don't want the house if it's empty." Jocelyn watched me. She had seen this before. "Audrey," she said, her voice dropping its professional crispness, "I am a lawyer. My job is to win wars. But you need to answer a question before I draft the filing. Do you want to destroy Marshall or do you want to wake him up? What's the difference? If you destroy him, you walk away with cash and a baby, and he probably spirals until he hits rock bottom, which from your description of that notebook might be a funeral home. If you want to wake him up, that's not a legal process. That's an intervention." I thought about the notebook. If she leaves, I die. I thought about the man who used to make me pancakes on Sundays, burning the edges because he was too busy dancing to Motown in the kitchen. "I want to wake him up," I said, "and then once he's awake, I want to see if there's a man left inside who is worth saving. But I need him to know, Jocelyn. I need him to know exactly how wrong he was. I need him to feel the weight of it." Jocelyn nodded. She closed the file. "Then don't sue him. Not yet. Confront him. Use this evidence as a sledgehammer. Break the delusion. If he doesn't snap out of it, then call me back, and we will take him for everything he has." "Okay," I said, standing up. "I'm going to end this." I drove back to the motel to shower and change. I put on the best outfit I had, a black sweater dress that hugged the tiny bump that was finally starting to show, and boots. I put on makeup. I wasn't going there as a victim. I was going as a prosecutor. I called Constance at 2 p.m. "It's time," I said. "Time for what?" Constance asked, sounding terrified. "I'm coming over. I want everyone there. You, Richard, Julian, Sarah, and Marshall." "Audrey, Marshall is..." "He's barely speaking." "I don't need him to speak. I need him to listen. Tell him if he wants the divorce papers signed, he needs to be in the living room at 4 p.m. Tell him I'm bringing them." It was a lie, but it was the only bait that would guarantee he'd show up. "Okay," Constance breathed. "Okay, I'll make sure they're there." I spent the next hour organizing the folders. Folder A, the medical truth, Dr. Sterling's note, the sperm survival data, the conception calendar. Folder B, the digital alibi, Netflix logs, heart rate data, Uber receipts. Folder C, the character witnesses, Gwendolyn's affidavit, statements from my team. Folder D, the suicide note, the photos of his journal. I packed them into my leather attaché case. It clicked shut with a sound like a gun cocking. I checked out of the Bluebird Inn. I left the key on the desk. "Leaving?" the acne-scarred kid asked. "Yeah," I said. "I'm gonna go collect a debt." He blinked. "Cool." I walked out to the car. The sky was darkening again. It was going to snow. Good. Let it snow. Let it bury the last 3 days of hell. The drive to the in-laws' house took 20 minutes. I didn't listen to music. I drove in silence, rehearsing my opening statement. I pulled into the driveway. Marshall's truck was there. Julian's SUV was there. Richard's sedan. The gang was all here. I walked up the path. The Christmas lights were off. The house looked dark, dormant. I didn't knock. I still had my key on the ring, and despite him changing the code, I knew Constance would have unlocked it for me. I turned the knob. It opened. I stepped into the hallway. The smell hit me again. Pine and old cinnamon, but now it was mixed with tension so thick it felt like humidity. I walked into the living room. They were arranged like a tableau in a museum. Richard in his armchair, looking grim. Constance on the sofa, clutching a tissue. Julian and Sarah standing by the fireplace, looking like they wanted to teleport anywhere else. And Marshall. He was standing by the window, looking out at the backyard. When he turned to face me, I almost gasped. He had aged 10 years in 3 days. His eyes were sunken, rimmed with red. He hadn't shaved. His shirt was wrinkled. He looked like a man who had been haunting his own life. He looked at me, and his eyes flickered to my stomach, then away, as if looking at me burned him. "You brought the papers?" he rasped. His voice was a wreck. "I brought papers," I said, my voice steady, projecting to the back of the room. "Just not the ones you think." I walked to the coffee table. I swept the decorative bowl of pine cones onto the floor. It clattered loudly, pine cones skittering across the hardwood. Nobody moved. I set the attaché case down. "Sit down, Marshall," I commanded. "I don't want to—" "Sit down." He sat. He collapsed, really, into the love seat opposite me. "For 3 days," I said, looking at each of them in turn, "I have been living in a motel off the highway because my husband decided to accuse me of a felony against our marriage without asking a single question. He told you I was a whore. He told you our child was a bastard. He told you I was plotting to leave him." I clicked the latches of the case. Snap. Snap. "Now," I said, pulling out the first folder, "you're going to listen to the truth. And if anyone interrupts me, I walk out that door and you never see me or this baby again." I opened folder A. "The accusation," I started, "is that I slept with Garrison Ford in October or November, resulting in this pregnancy. Marshall claims the math doesn't work because we haven't been intimate since August." I slapped Dr. Sterling's notarized letter onto the table. It hit the wood with a satisfying slap. "This is from Dr. Elizabeth Sterling, board-certified OBGYN. It states, unequivocally, that based on fetal measurements, conception occurred between August 20th and August 25th. I looked at Marshall. "August 22nd, the Cape. It rained. We stayed in bed until noon. Do you remember, Marshall? Or have you rewritten that part of history, too?" Marshall flinched. He stared at the paper but didn't touch it. "Read it," I ordered. He reached out a shaking hand. He read the letter. I saw his eyes scanning the lines about biological impossibility. "August," he whispered. "Folder B," I said, relentless. "The affair. You tracked my location. You saw I was at the hotel. You saw Garrison was at the hotel. You assumed we were together." I laid out the spreadsheets, the Netflix logs, the heart rate data. "This is my digital footprint. This is Garrison's Apple Watch health data. Unless my boss has a resting heart rate of 58 beats per minute while having vigorous sex with me, he was sleeping, alone, in room 4 and 12. I was in room 305 watching The Great British Bake Off." I pulled out the affidavit from Gwendolyn. "And this," I said, my voice rising, "is a sworn statement from Garrison's wife, Gwendolyn. She details every phone call, every FaceTime, every night she spent talking to her husband while you thought he was sleeping with me. She also included a threat to sue you for defamation if you ever say her husband's name again. Marshall was pale now, translucent. He was reading the data, his eyes darting back and forth. The structure of his delusion was crumbling. He couldn't argue with heart rates. He couldn't argue with biometrics. "I didn't," he stammered. "I saw the photo, the Instagram." "You saw a photo of a lobby," I shouted. "And you built a divorce around it." "And finally," I said, lowering my voice, I pulled out the last items, the photos of his journal. "I went to the house today, Marshall. Constance let me in." Marshall's head snapped up. You read my journal." "I read the suicide note you've been writing for 2 months," I said. I tossed the photos onto the table. "This isn't about me. This isn't about Garrison. This is about you hating yourself because Julian is having a baby and you felt like a failure." The room went dead silent. Julian looked at Marshall, his eyes wide. "You convinced yourself I was leaving because you don't think you're worth staying for," I said, tears finally spilling over my cheeks. "You didn't trust me because you don't trust that anyone could love you, so you tried to fire me before I could quit." Marshall looked at the photos of his own handwriting, the frantic scrawls of a man spiraling into the abyss. "I am a failure of a man. If she leaves, I die." He made a sound. It wasn't a word. It was a guttural animal noise of pure pain. He slid off the love seat. He didn't stand up. He slid down until he was kneeling on the rug, his hands clutching the medical report and the journal photos. I thought, he choked out. "The baby. The timing. I thought I was sterile. Dad said." He looked up at Richard. Richard, the patriarch, the man who had made the shooting blanks joke, looked like he had been punched in the gut. "Marshall," Richard said, his voice trembling. "Son, I was joking. It was a bad joke. I never meant—" "You said it!" Marshall screamed, suddenly finding a voice. He looked at his father with wild eyes. "You said at least one of my boys can get the job done. You said it!" "I was drunk," Richard shouted back, standing up. "I was a stupid, drunk old man making a ribald joke. I didn't mean you were actually—" "Christ, Marshall!" Marshall put his head in his hands and began to sob, not polite crying. Ugly, heaving sobs that shook his entire frame. He curled into a ball on the rug, surrounded by the papers that proved he was a fool. "I'm sorry," he wailed into the carpet. I'm sorry. Oh God, Audrey, I'm sorry." It was pathetic. It was heartbreaking. Constance moved to go to him, but Richard held her back. "No," Richard said, his voice hard but tears in his own eyes. "Let him feel it. He needs to feel it." Julian stepped forward. He looked down at his brother. "You almost destroyed your life because you were jealous of me?" Julian asked, his voice quiet. "Marshall, I'm having a panic attack every day about this baby. I don't know what I'm doing. And you think I'm some golden god? We're just guys, man. We're just idiots." Marshall just kept sobbing. "She's going to leave me. She's going to leave me." I stood over him. I looked at the man I had married. He was broken, completely shattered. I could kneel down. I could hug him. I could tell him it was okay, that we would fix it, but it wasn't okay. I didn't kneel. I reached into my bag and pulled out one last envelope, a white business envelope. "Marshall," I said. He didn't look up. He just kept rocking. "Marshall, look at me." He slowly raised his head. His face was a mask of snot and tears. He looked like a child. "I love you," I said. "I have loved you since we were 22, but I don't like you right now, and I don't trust you. You didn't just hurt my feelings. You endangered our child with this stress. You humiliated me. You broke the contract of this marriage." I held out the envelope. "This is a letter. It outlines my terms. You have 48 hours. He reached for it with a trembling hand. What does it say? It says you withdraw the divorce filing immediately, with prejudice. It says you start individual therapy, real therapy, not just journaling, twice a week. It says we go to marriage counseling. And it says I am not moving back in today. No, he whispered. Please don't go. I'm going to stay at the Marriott downtown, I said. Not a motel, a nice hotel. You are going to pay for it. I need space. I need to not look at you for a few days. I'll do anything, he begged. Audrey, please, I'll do the therapy. I'll do whatever you want. You have 48 hours to set up the appointments and withdraw the papers. If you don't, then I assume you made your choice. I turned to Constance. She was crying silently. Take care of him, I said, but don't coddle him. He's a grown man. I picked up my empty attaché case. I left the evidence on the table. Let them look at it. Let them memorize the timeline of his failure. I walked to the door. Audrey! Marshall screamed my name, a desperate, broken sound. I didn't turn around. I opened the door, walked out into the cold twilight, and got into my car. I didn't cry until I was on the highway. And then I cried for the man I used to know, hoping he could find his way back to the surface. The Marriott was nice. It had room service and sheets that didn't smell like despair. I slept for 14 hours. My body finally shut down after the adrenaline crash. I woke up, ordered a club sandwich, and waited. I didn't call him. I didn't text him. I watched Law and Order marathons and touched my belly, whispering to the little girl inside that her daddy was trying to fix his brain. 47 hours later. There was a knock on the door. I looked through the peephole. Marshall. He had shaved. He was wearing a clean shirt. He still looked tired, deep shadows under his eyes, but he was standing upright. He wasn't the crumpled heap on the rug anymore. I opened the door. He didn't try to come in. He stood in the hallway, respectful of the threshold. I did it, he said. His voice was steady, hoarse, but steady. He handed me a folder. I opened it. A confirmation from the lawyer that the divorce petition was withdrawn, an appointment card for Dr. Aris, psychiatrist, for tomorrow morning, a receipt for a marriage counseling intake session next Tuesday. I also called Garrison, he said, and Gwendolyn. I apologized. Gwendolyn called me a pathetic worm, but she accepted the apology. I almost smiled. She's protective. I know. Marshall looked at me. He looked at my stomach. I'm sick, Audrey. I know that now. I have depression. I have anxiety. I have this hole inside me where my self-esteem should be, and I let it eat us. Yes, I said. You did. I want to fix it. I don't expect you to forgive me yet. I don't expect you to move back in yet, but I want to fight for us if you'll let me. I looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes, but I also saw resolve. He wasn't hiding anymore. He wasn't scribbling in a secret notebook. He was standing in the light, owning his mess. I'm keeping the hotel room for another week, I said. He nodded. Okay, I understand. But, I added, stepping back to leave the door open, you can come in, we can order room service, and you can talk to your daughter. He let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for a month. He stepped into the room. He didn't touch me. He knelt down in front of me, put his hands on my knees, and pressed his forehead against my stomach. Hi, he whispered to the baby. I'm your dad. I'm an idiot, but I'm going to get better. I rested my hand on his head. His hair felt familiar. We weren't fixed, but the demolition had stopped. Now, we just had to rebuild. 3 months later, I'm writing this from the nursery. It's painted a soft sage green. Audrey's choice, obviously, because I'm not allowed to pick colors after the divorce paper Christmas incident. Our daughter, Maya, was born 2 weeks early, but she's healthy. She has Marshall's nose and my lungs. Marshall is getting there. He's on Lexapro. It took about 6 weeks to kick in, but the difference is night and day. The manic paranoia is gone. The self-loathing is quieter. He still has bad days where he feels like he's not enough, but now he has tools. He says, "I'm having an intrusive thought," instead of accusing me of sleeping with the mailman. We are in counseling twice a week. It's brutal. We spend a lot of time talking about trust. I still flinch sometimes when he asks who I'm texting. He has to earn the right to ask that question again. Julian and Sarah had their boy. Marshall held his nephew and didn't explode. He actually smiled. It was a real smile. Garrison and Gwendolyn came to the baby shower. Gwendolyn cornered Marshall by the punch bowl and threatened him with a cake knife if he ever hurt me again. They are now oddly close friends. I think Marshall needs a terrifying mother figure, and Gwendolyn is happy to oblige. I wear my wedding ring again. But I also wear a necklace Marshall gave me when Maya was born. It's a small gold anchor. He said it's to remind him to stay grounded, to not drift away into the storms in his head. It's not a fairy tale. I didn't forget what he did. There are nights I look at him and remember the hallway, the accusations, the motel room. But then I see him changing a diaper at 3 a.m., singing Motown to a screaming infant, and I think, maybe we make it. We're taking it one day at a time. And for now, that's enough. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.